Hello, everyone. We've got about a minute to go. I figure we'll give just a little bit more time. We've got some folks still joining. So go ahead and get your caffeinated beverage of choice ready. Uh, dig into your lunch, get comfortable, and we'll be getting started here in just another minute or two. All right. Sorry for the delay. We are having a tornado siren test going on in Oklahoma today. I just wanted to get through the brunt of that before we start. So, welcome. Today we're going to talk about analytics in SharePoint. That is a hot topic. And to help me with that, I've got the guys from Unlimited Viz here today. Ed Sinez, Dean Swan, and John White. How are you guys today?
We are doing well, and fortunately no tornadoes in our vicinity, and no tornado sirens.
Just snow.
Yay!
Just snow.
It's cold, but apart from that.
Rarely are there tornadoes and snow. That would be a bit much.
So thank you, Joy. It's a pleasure to talk to everybody today, and we've been working with the Pay Group for quite some time. We've developed some software applications that we're going to speak to today. But before we do that, one of the things that we'd like to do is kind of frame the problems. So one of the things that we always do when we talk to customers is we discuss it in this context. What business problem are we trying to solve? So from an analytics perspective, we're trying to address things, as an example, within the SharePoint ecosystem. We've seen this frequently where, build it and they will come. So driving adoption, and Joy, a large part of your job, I'm sure you're answering this question, is driving adoption is a multifaceted and complex problem. So we've built this thing and then nobody's using it. And so what we found is that analytics can really aid in the conversations. And let me give you an example of that. So, if you're having a conversation with somebody and say, well, things seem to be going okay, but we think the Northwest region needs a little bit more training. and change that conversation with your stakeholder to be something like this. Our level of engagement jumped 30% in the last quarter, and the Southeast region is leading at 45%, but we think the Northwest region, being down at about 10%, needs a little bit more training. So if you're getting your stakeholder to have a conversation with you about budget and the ability to go and address some of these problems, having concrete analytics in place can really aid that conversation. So that's one of the things that we find in field that is very helpful. And also just generally speaking, if you kind of have a starting point, this is where we're at, this is where we're tracking to, it really aids the conversation. And similarly, I mean, if you're having a finance conversation, I mean, obviously you'd be pulling out a P&L statement or an income statement or something of that nature to have that conversation. And really, this is what we're doing. And then you get the other extreme where you've deployed SharePoint and maybe some of the other artifacts that are in the Office 365 ecosystem, like groups and or like site collections, libraries, and whatnot. And you've got content everywhere. You have kind of that the share in SharePoint has gone very viral for you. And
that does happen. I think you've pointed out already two flip sides of the same coin. You build it, and sometimes it's hard to get people there to start using it, and you're like the comedian standing on stage going, okay, is this microphone even working? Is anybody here? What are people doing? And then, like you said, you just flip this slide. Now you've all of a sudden it catches on. It spreads like wildfire. I see the G word there, governance.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's insane, right? It's like, oh my gosh, not only are they finally using it, but there's stuff everywhere. What do we do?
Mm-hmm. As I used to say, if you Google SharePoint governance, comes in one of the top 3 hits on the return.
It's kind of a dirty word in a lot of ways, but oh my gosh, a nice governance plan is a good thing to have.
and then being able to articulate that in real terms to people is another challenge that you run into. And like I said, if you take, we've talked to organizations with hundreds of site collections, thousands of sites, and you end up with largely called a spread mart. How do you get control of that, and how do you really even understand it? And starting with an inventory and analytics can provide some of that is a really good way to do that. And then of course activity. What are people doing? So not just the content, but what is it that's really kind of moving the needle for you? So now talking about SharePoint, and we kind of, if you will, use air quotes around the term SharePoint, because SharePoint is now becoming the de facto file system for Office 365. It's being used for groups, teams, and now even Yammer. OneDrive is really SharePoint. SharePoint context. My sites used to be kind of these little containers that's now been converted into OneDrive. So one of the challenges that you run into when you're doing this type of deployment is, and we've seen situations where people have just turned off groups, or where they've turned off some of these other very useful tools in order to make sure that we have control over who's creating them, what kind of content can go into them, how are we sharing them. Again, Joy, to your point around governance, that's very much a part of that whole deployment model. And then discovery. I mean, this is something that we've actually, in our own internal use, have realized that having an analytics tool can actually also be a bit of a discovery tool. If you think about discovery engines, I mean, we have Delve, but it's not really what we call deterministic search. It's more suggestions as to content that may be of interest to you. If I need to go and find a specific type of document across all of these workloads, there's really no tool to kind of do that. And that's something that's also beyond simple analytics. Some of our customers are starting to see the value in having those types of tools in place. Again, it's a quasi-governance type of play. I wouldn't call it document discovery, but you can do, in fact, document discovery by using some of these tools.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting landscape now, especially when we realized a year ago that every time I create a team, I get a SharePoint site.
Right.
That was a fun day.
Oh, that's like collection.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. That's specific.
So Dean, I'm just going to ask you to talk through a little bit about kind of our positioning and a little bit about TyGraph, the product that we've built.
Yeah, sure, Ed. Thanks. The way we help people at TyGraph is, our tagline is building intelligent tools for better collaboration. But the three messages you see on this screen, these are the key things that customers come to us for and that we help them with. A lot of times when you go on a journey to either deploy something like Yammer or Teams or SharePoint, you're asked to show the value of your network, and it's very tough to do that without analytics and reporting. We help folks do that. We help people validate your strategy, your campaigns, and your initiatives. Oftentimes, we have community managers that will kick off a campaign with regard to increasing the use of Yammer in a particular group. We help them understand how that's going and what could be done to improve the adoption. And finally, we help people manage the velocity of change going on in the organization. We're asked to do so much with the information that is being proliferated in our organizations. And with analytics, you can laser in on those conversations or those threads that have business value and be able to get through that velocity of change in a reasonable manner. And I wanted to focus just on what our TyGraph Pulse product is all about. As many of you are going to Office 365, you really need a way to get a good handle on what's happening in all those workloads. TyGraph Pulse is our overview product where we have information regarding SharePoint, Yammer, OneDrive, Teams. You can see there on your screen. Additionally, we have information about licensing and groups that a lot of our customers find helpful. Now, you see down below in the teal color some of the examples where we go a little deeper. SharePoint site activity, user activity, a little bit on Yammer, Exchange, OneDrive, etc. Now again, TyGraph Pulse is our overview product. We also have in market 3 or 4 of the products that go deeper: TyGraph for Yammer, TyGraph for SharePoint, TyGraph for Teams, where we really dive into the usage of the tools in a much deeper and broader way. Back to you, Ed.
Sure, and one of the things from a just landscape point of view, we're in what you'd call the big data sphere, and people often throw that term around, but we're processing about 4 billion rows of data per month, and we're growing that at about 500 million rows per month. So we do quite a bit of scale. We have a global presence. You can see from the scattergram map that kind of where our customers are based. We've also had a few awards given to us, so we're pretty pleased about that. But most important for you is that you can get a free trial of TyGraph. So whether you want to try one of the specific workloads or you want to try TyGraph Pulse, one of the things that we found help really articulate the value of what we do is to provide people with the trial, because what that does is it allows them to get their data in context. It's one thing to talk about the data as, test data or trial data, or sorry, some of our data or demo data. But once you get that data in your context, it's something that that really can help you take a look at your organization and how your workloads are performing. So with that, I will jump over to a demonstration of what we have. So Dean, why don't you help us unpack this one?
Sure, yeah. So as I was mentioning previously, TyGraph Pulse is an overview of your Office 365 platform and the various workloads. This first report, as you can notice, we're in Power BI. We're big believers in the power of Power BI and we use it for our tool for a couple reasons that I'm going to tell you about during this demonstration. But this first report is about the last 30 days. We built this report to put the platforms in an aggregate all in one report so you can see it, each of these workloads next to each other. Teams, Yammer, Skype, these cards give us a good understanding of what's what in our organization. One of the popular visuals on this particular page is comm methods or communication methods in the lower left. You notice we juxtapose Teams, Yammer, and email next to each other to see which tools are being used when in relative to each other. And you can see email, as you might expect, still rules the day. That's a lot of, the thing we forget about emails, we really can't control what people send us. We're getting a lot better handle on spam, obviously, but you can see as Ed hovers over the lines, the numbers pop up in terms of usage. So lots of email, some Yammer, and Teams. You'll also get at a glance when the weekends were. Let's move over to the next report, Ed, on groups. This is important. Joy mentioned the G word earlier. It not only does it stand for governance, it stands for groups as well, an important construct within the Microsoft Office 365 platform. We wanted to get in the hands of our users our groups proliferating. What's the growth of items? Are we connecting, are we having a bunch of, SharePoint connected groups pop up? And one of the things that we'll come back to time and again, in the lower left, you'll see a table there where we've got a list of groups and various pieces of metadata about each one of those. Each of our tables has columns that are sortable. So if you wanted to just sort by page views, you could certainly do that. You could sort by, let's see how much SharePoint storage has been used. This metaphor, this table use idea we carry this throughout all of our products, and I'll show you an additional capability here in just a couple of slides. Let's move over to licensing, Ed.
Do you mind if I interrupt you for half a second? Just for anybody that maybe is brand new to Office 365, that maybe hasn't really dug into groups yet, it can be kind of a nebulous concept. Groups have been around for a while, but they've really started to come on stage and almost take a center stage here recently. But groups can almost be looked at, or you may see an Office 365 group, as a distribution list on steroids. I believe that's how Christian Buckley describes it. So, our distribution groups, it's a good way to think about it. Our distribution groups, right? You would create a list of people and they went together with a common email address, right? So if you needed to email everyone on the finance team, you send an email to the finance distribution list, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now there's this thing called a group, an Office 365 group. And it is a group of people that share common assets and security, such as an email address or a SharePoint site or a planner space and or a SharePoint site. In fact, our modern SharePoint team sites, when those are created, they get a group that goes along with it. So it's kind of this service that's being added into the fabric of Office 365. So if you're not super familiar with it, that's okay. I encourage some reading, and we can even, if you want some more resources on that, please feel free to reach out to me. I can get that in your hands. Okay, sorry about that, guys.
Oh, that was great. Thanks.
Yeah, very much appreciate that, Joy. Groups, wow, what a concept.
It's pretty nebulous, but yeah.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah, that clears it up for me. Office 365 license activity report. The key here is we're a BI company, and part of having your DNA in BI is the belief that in order for people to make good decisions, you have to be transparent about what measures mean and what you're presenting on a page. If I am talking to a CFO and she can't trust what she's, the definition behind what she's seeing, let alone the transparency of the visual, then it doesn't really help her. So just like you guys that are responsible for dealing with Microsoft with regard to licenses, we wanted to make this as transparent as possible, what you're using, what you're not. You can see there as Ed cross-filtered one of the visuals around license assigned, he hit the Power BI Pro. So for example, if I was expecting, I've got 20 people in my organization and only 11 have licenses assigned, I might want to dig into that. On the other hand, I want to see, our licenses, do we have active users in using those licenses? And if not, I might want to change my enterprise agreement. That's what we're looking for here. We want some transparency behind, what you really are using from Microsoft. One of the things that Ed's doing up there on the date range is we have many on-page slicers that help us if I wanted to go, for example, just a period of time, in May or in June near the, my renewal or something like that, I could certainly do that. So I'll move quickly through the next couple of reports. SharePoint sites and SharePoint users. We have 2 reports in Pulse dedicated here. And when we first started talking about the table structure that we have in Pulse, I mentioned there was something else I wanted to talk about, and you'll see it here on this page. Anytime you have the icon, that little chain link icon in the second column, Ed, if you'll hover over that, in all of our products, one of the things that we do is we give you the ability to navigate back to the particular resource that I'm focused on here. And this would allow me to go to, for example, the Unlimited Viz SharePoint site or the mysharepoint.com. We try to build in a level of interactivity for those of you that are responsible, for the various resources in Office 365, so you can get to them quickly. And again, you have the ability to sort all these all these columns, by a click of the mouse to get more information about each of those activities. If we can move on to
that old Excel spreadsheet we used to get.
Oh,
yes.
You remember that.
I'm sure there are a number of folks on the call that have to deal with enterprise agreements. And we've moved on from licensing, but still, any time that you're dealing with, Excel, you do have limits, and Power BI gives you a lot more options. If we can move over to the SharePoint users, here we're dealing with SharePoint user activity, and as you've seen here throughout, Ed's showing how we can cross-filter and drill down into some of the information. Here we're looking at user activity aggregated by those titles below. So file views, pages visited, files synced, shared. It gives you a lot of information on the go. And then we always have our hover capability there you go. So you can see, a little more information as we hover over. If we can move over to Teams, Ed, let's take a look at Teams.
We do have one question real quick.
Cool.
Does your analytics provide external sharing details?
Yes, it does.
Awesome.
So we go deep into that in our TyGraph for SharePoint product. But that's external sharing. I'm glad they asked that question. We get it a lot, and it's something that we feel pretty strongly, again, back to that word transparency. We shed light on some of that needs, action. Sometimes it's perfectly okay. But the point is, if you don't know it, you can't act on it. So yes, it's a great question.
I'll jump in with a use case if you like, Dave.
Yeah, please do, John.
I've got, as Joy would know too, oftentimes I'll be presenting at a conference, and I want to get the deck out to the entire audience. What I typically will do is have that stored in a OneDrive, whether it's my organizational OneDrive in our presentations group or it's my personal business OneDrive. I will get an anonymous link for that and then post it on my slides. So during the presentation, people can follow along with the slides or download it afterwards. And with this, I'm able to now go afterwards and see actually who's been, because of the time, because of the time horizon, as well as the type of activity that the external anonymous users are doing, I can see what content they were accessing and how they were accessing it. So there's a fair level of detail that we can do that with. I just happen to have a use case, so I wanted to jump in. Sorry, D.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Ed, I see you've jumped over. There you go. Thank you.
So that's perfect right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So
teaser.
Yeah, just wanted to show that. Let's talk about Teams for a couple of minutes here. We're super excited about Microsoft Teams as a product, and we're happy to say that we have Teams activity in Pulse for your use. We're looking at top Teams users, and you can see there that we have that bar graph that shows private messages, chat messages, voice calls. We have a working out loud score, which is an algorithm that we built to help. We're strong believers in the whole working out loud movement, and we're just pointing that out on a user level. One thing I would like to say, I know some of you work for global companies that have offices in, let's say, Austria, Germany, France, who have a different view of seeing people's names on screens with regard to GDPR. I just want to let you know that vendors like us are very much aware of the struggles that you have in those countries. We offer the ability to obfuscate or have those users opt out. And regardless if you're looking at our products, the one thing that I would ask you is any analytics package that you are considering, please ask them about how they're dealing with not GDPR, the regulation, but how it impacts their product. That's really where it matters. They can talk about it, but just make sure that you have a good conversation about how they do that for you. In terms of Teams device usage, you see we have a pie graph. I'll just go on record as saying the pie graph is my least favorite visualization. But for now, it works for this particular use case. You won't see many of these in TyGraph. Ed, if I know we have a OneDrive report, but for the benefit of time, I'm wondering if maybe we just mention Yammer, email, Skype, and we'll catch up OneDrive on the SharePoint demonstration. For Yammer user activity, we have top Yammer users, read, likes, and posts. The thing I wanted to mention here with Yammer is that we have a product that's been in market since 2014 that covers not only what you see here, but much, much more with our own influencer score, a measure of active engagement to help you understand, who's interacting with Yammer, how they're interacting, who's making a difference in your network with the influencer score. We have the ability to help you laser in on those conversations that are making a difference with our thread impact score, and much more. We also have this overview report so that you can aggregate Yammer information alongside Teams, email, and more. With that, can we just have a peek at email? One of the things that we have found with working with our customers is email is something that they're interested in, but it's been a tool that has been around so long. There are other ways to think about email analytics, but we think it's important to have it juxtaposed all these other tools in the platform, so that you can, because often people want to know, is my email usage going down or up? Because we're introducing these other tools, so that's why we have it here. And then
you can also see here that I read less than half of my email.
I would love for email traffic to go down. Can we make that happen?
Yeah, and again, email certainly has its place, but most companies do wish to see it go down. And John brought up a great point there. If you could just go back to email. Sorry. I'm giving it a bit of a short shrift here, but there are many things that you'll want your analytics partner to help you with, and a lot of it is not just instrumenting your environment, but it really comes down to understanding and then acting on what you see. So in John's example, he reads, half of his email. I don't know if that means
Almost.
anything to me specifically, but it's a signal, and maybe I put that with, some other signals about John or his team, and that might lead me to a business decision about what tools, we put forth going forward.
I know if I send John an email, not to expect a response.
Yeah.
But you did your part.
Oh, I respond to you.
50% of the time, John will respond.
That's right.
Statistically, it's about right.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, Joy. If any of the folks on the call today, I would be very interested in kind of their view on analytics and email in general. It's one area that we seem to get a lot of privacy questions, and just know that in anything that we collect, we're certainly sensitive to the privacy of email. Finally, in TyGraph Pulse, we have Skype activity. The key concept here is meetings that were scheduled and meetings that weren't, and those are on the bottom left and right. And I think it's important to just kind of understand here, the level of ad hoc work that gets done in an organization versus meetings in general. You can see Ed there, for example, 4,397 audio minutes. That's some sore ears right there.
We know who the talker is.
Yeah, or the listener, as the case may be. But the key here is that, again, you have the ability to see Skype info at a level, at a pretty detailed level. Ed's pointing out the company and department information. One of the things that as a lot of the IT professionals on the call will resonate with my comment with regard to activity directories. Everybody has them, and everybody also has a project to clean them up. But as you can see there, we do present company and department. One of the very first customizations people often ask for is the ability to mash up HR information, role, region, and organizational hierarchy. It really allows you to amplify all these signals in a way that are very helpful to the business. And Ed, I'll stop there on TyGraph Pulse.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll dive a little bit more into the SharePoint, TyGraph for SharePoint product. And what we've done with this product is scoped it specifically to all SharePoint activities. And as I pointed out in my slides earlier, when we talk about SharePoint, we also talk about them in the context of containers. So you can see here we have things like group sites, but we also have SharePoint sites that are actual groups. And if you had any type of other template deployed to your SharePoint environment, we would pick that up. Similar to the other products, as Dean had mentioned earlier, we have hyperlinks to each one of the sites themselves. So if you wanted to go and administer or look something up specifically, those links are very useful. Provide you some gas gauges across the top, and of course across the bottom. Similarly, you can slice and dice your information by different time horizons. And again, if you wanted to scope into a specific, how much usage, number of users, etc., you can pull this up. One of the other things that we can do with, and this is at a site collection level, so if I want to drill down within that site collection to all of the sites, this drill through takes me to this report and allows me to do so. So I can look at admin, clients, demos, et cetera, and just scroll through here. There's also the concept of a focus mode, which is a Power BI construct that allows me to pop these out and then interact with them in a more easy to use visual. I'm going to jump over into activity analytics because this is something, as we saw from the different questions that were coming forward, something people may be of interest to. So let's say I want to know, who deleted something across my network. I can focus that in on a file deleted activity. And then if I want to look specifically at John and then specifically at John within a time frame, I can go see all the files that John has deleted within that time horizon. There may be other activities that you might want to track, like files downloaded, so on and so forth. Sharing is another one. Files that have been shared inherently, or files or activity has been or sharing has been activated for a particular file. The other thing that we like to do is talk about inactive files. So, that whole concept of going and cleaning things up. So we have given you a visualization here, which will allow you to scope very quickly on those files that have been not used within 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, or things that have been not happened in over a year. And this really aids in that conversation with the stakeholders where they say, I can't delete that, everybody's using it. And you show them the report that says, well, actually, no, you haven't. The other question that we get asked frequently is, can I export this data? And the answer is yes. Again, another Power BI facility. So I could take a list that I've sliced and diced to and export that content over for a user to be able to use Excel for distribution.
And that plays right into the hands of retention, which is fantastic.
Yeah, so there's the retain and then the not retain. I often liken SharePoint farms to people's garages, and every once in a while you need that garage makeover person to come in and clean things up. But getting an inventory of the assets is the first thing, because you don't want to throw out the good stuff, obviously, and then getting an idea as to who's using what is very helpful in that context.
Can I jump in for just a second, Ed?
Yeah.
Joy brings up a good point. I don't know that she was referring to retention in the way I'm about to. You probably talked about SharePoint content being retained, but an important thing to note about this product is that the data that it feeds from is coming from Office 365, and they only keep your usage data for 6 months. Depending on how they structure it, they'll keep some aggregate versions of that data a little bit longer. But depending on the data we're talking about, it can be as little as 30 days that they'll keep it for. So with TyGraph, we keep it basically as long as you're with us.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and especially Microsoft does have a product called the Adoption Content Pack, which is free to all users. Encourage you to try it out. But one of the problems with that is the fact that the data does fall off. It's refreshed roughly every week, sometimes 10 days, give or take. What we do is we harvest the daily the information daily so that we can get very granular with our time and date slicers. And in addition, as John said, we keep it in perpetuity. So, one of the visualizations we always do is year over year. So, compare March last year to March this year, things of that nature, which is not possible if you don't have the ability to go beyond 1 year. I will just give you one last taste. This is OneDrive, and we're taking a look at some of the file activities around OneDrive. And so I'm just going to turn on my my bookmarks. This is a new feature in Power BI, and so if we want to look at all the files that are opened, what we're doing is we're pre-selecting some of these activities for users to make it really easy. So sync activity, this is something that's come to our attention quite a lot as of late, where people are having issues with sync. So we want to know kind of who's syncing, and if there are issues, some of those activities we can get to, some of them we can't, but certainly we'll be able to expose who is performing those activities. File transfers, as you can see, all the file downloads that have happened, and this is what John was talking about in the context of his seminars, and which files were downloaded anonymously. And then of course back to all activities. John is a bit of an anomaly with regard to OneDrive.
Right there.
Yeah, he takes a lot of photos and keeps them in OneDrive. So there's and then John had an event in November of 2017, which kind of skewed our metrics, where 71,801 files were accidentally deleted. And then
those from my OneDrive. It was okay.
From his OneDrive. So then, and then you could see between November and December, John was putting those files back.
All of them.
So as you can see, we can get pretty detailed with regard to every piece of activity that's going on. As John mentioned, we harvest all the data from the audit of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So we'll get into all the API endpoints that we call, but pretty much you can appreciate that we call the ones that are important. And the advantage of doing that is that we can get very granular with the information that we're bringing forward for our customers. And though we have a number of pre-baked reports, 100% of our customers take what we have, and they may do things like this. They'll go into edit report mode, they'll take that report, they'll duplicate it, and then they'll start building their own page of what they need for their specific use cases or for their targeted audiences. So with that, it was a bit of a fire hose, Joy, but I will pause there for take any questions or.
There's one question, you touched on it a little bit, but how is TyGraph different from the Power BI adoption pack for Office 365? So data retention is a very big difference.
Right. So it's very name. Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
Yeah. So both Ed and John mentioned two items. A third, I want very specifically, if you're looking for usage information on a user, in the adoption content pack, you're only going to get that at a detail level for the past 30 days. That's it. You can't get it past that. If you try, you're going to run into aggregated data. You won't get any more than that. And because of the way we engineer the collection of it, we have more on, let's say day 2 than you would have in the adoption content pack. The other item that I would mention is we're always looking to make Power BI more friendly. So all of our labels, we try to make them make as much sense in English as when you read them. Certainly make more sense than how I'm explaining it. But the point is that we also include a data dictionary so that anyone can understand the visualizations at a detail level with definitions.
And the other big thing is that it is a content pack. So with that, what is physically happening is you're drawing data down out of the Office 365 system, but you're very limited in terms of what you can do with a content pack. So for example, augmenting it with HR data and things of that nature are not something that's possible with a content pack versus a full Power BI model that we ship.
I'll jump in and just mention, it's been touched on as well, granularity. Day level granularity. Many of the measures you'll find in the adoption content pack you can only drill down to the month level, so you can see an aggregate amount of data for a month. Yeah. In our case, it's always, you can slice down to days, weeks, you name it.
It's a great question, though, and I'm sure a lot of people, your stakeholders and folks funding projects will want to know. And Ed mentioned, you said it was free to all users. Actually, it is free, but it's not available to all users.
That's a good point.
It's really given to the global admins, and they can assign reader roles if they wish. But we're trying to, like a lot of other folks, we're trying to democratize the use of data in the organization to drive the decision making down to the appropriate level. And with the way we do things, that's available out of the box.
And we have another question. For OneDrive, can you provide analytics on the most synced sites, libraries, etc.?
So I'll jump on that if you guys are good with that.
Yeah, please do.
Yes. Is the short answer.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Now the question was OneDrive, and the problem is the term OneDrive because it can mean it's such an overloaded term. OneDrive normally was how most people refer to it as the OneDrive for business, the My Site. I have a OneDrive, you have a OneDrive, Ed has a OneDrive, etc. But we use the same sync client to synchronize that OneDrive, or if you have multiple tenants, all of your different OneDrives. Use the same sync client to synchronize SharePoint libraries, which in some cases can be called group OneDrives, which is really annoying. So I want to make the distinction between personal OneDrives and I'm not talking about the consumer version of OneDrive. You see how confusing this gets quickly?
The My Site OneDrives, right?
Yeah, the My Site style OneDrive, and then the SharePoint library style OneDrives. So our TyGraph for SharePoint product, you saw some of that. Ed was in there. You could actually see in one of our tables sync. So you can definitely see the most synchronized libraries right there. You can do the same thing on the personal OneDrives as well. So the answer is very simply yes, but I did want to nuance it that way because you mentioned OneDrive and then libraries. So I want to make sure we covered both of those.
Yeah, thank you. All right, anybody else have any questions? Please don't be shy. These have been fantastic questions. We're keeping these guys on their toes, and they need it.
That is for certain.
Oh yeah.
Oh, here we go. We got more. Let's see. What about server drives? So, so do you mean being able to pull analytics on on-prem servers?
So so this is a cloud server. This is for Office 365, to be clear.
Okay.
However, well, because of the way it's structured, you can customize it. And so if there's a way to gather that information, for example, from the SharePoint usage logs, that could be as a customization aggregated in. It's not something we offer out of the box.
Okay.
But if you've got SharePoint 2016 or above, which is coming, you can federate your usage data with Office 365, and in which case we can report on that because it's streamed up to the cloud and commingled with the rest of the Office 365 activity data.
Gotcha. And do you provide analytics for image clicks, number of views on Yammer posts?
Yeah, so that's currently not. So let me answer it. I'm going to caveat my answer. We have file views in our TyGraph for Yammer product, and they are based on what comes through the activity stream. So the short answer is yes. So I'll stop there. We expect the endpoints to improve for file views, and when they do, we're going to add those API endpoints as well.
Excellent. And a question is a recording of this webinar going to be made available? Yes, absolutely. We are recording. And once this wraps, we'll get this downloaded and an email link will be going out. So do be looking for that.
Joy, I'll throw one thing in because we get this frequently, especially for those on the call that are financial services or have sensitive data in pharmaceutical companies and so forth. We deploy as a software as a solution service, a SaaS service, which basically means that after you sign up, authorize our application to harvest your data, we will do everything for you, if you will. When we deploy TyGraph out, we deploy it to your tenant space in that you receive a Power BI file, you instantiate it in your tenant space, and you're logging in with your user ID and password, and that's how you access it. We also have an online version where it's Power BI embedded, where you can just go to a website and consume data, and that's meant for the masses as opposed to the people that are doing specific analytics. So as Dean was saying, we're trying to democratize things, and if we want to, give group owners as an example analytics to their groups, then we will be able to provide for that. But the other part of that equation is that companies in the European Union will require that the database lives in their Azure tenant space. So we have that deployment capability, and we also have the deployment capability of putting absolutely everything behind their firewall. So we can take TyGraph and deploy it in their Azure tenant space. So we're not going to preclude how people need to consume this, knowing that there's governance requirements that would eclipse us from working with some of those companies.
And that should tie well into both the educational and the government environment.
Absolutely. Well, government has their own Office 365 deployment too, and so we can deploy to that Office 365 Azure tenant space that's specifically targeted to government.
Excellent, excellent. And we had a question on search. Do you provide SharePoint search analytics like failed results?
Oh.
Ooh.
Nope.
The reason it's one of the most popular requests. We do not have it in the product because it's not available.
Yeah,
it's not get it out of Microsoft yet.
And we are pushing on those teams.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Really hard. Really hard.
Gotcha. We have a follow-up. She said, did I hear right that there is a TyGraph on-prem solution, and does this address HIPAA PHI for healthcare organizations?
Correct, yes.
Excellent. You guys are on it.
Yep. I can't show you our customer base. Most of our customers, again, global deployments, but we deal with companies. Well, we can name drop Microsoft. They are a customer of TyGraph because they've said it publicly. But we deal with some very large global, most of our customer base are very large global organizations. So early on in our journey, 4 years ago, we had to cross that chasm. In fact, when we first shipped TyGraph, it was only on premises. And then we moved to a SaaS solution over time. So, and we've actually it was part of our DNA to be able to offer that.
Okay. So you've evolved into the cloud world.
Correct. Yeah, it's just a lot easier than it has been, especially if organizations are using Azure, because we have monitoring systems that allow us to make sure that TyGraph is running inside their firewall without actually ever having to touch it or see it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're caught up on questions. I'm going to give a last call. Any questions out there? If for some reason, let's say an hour goes by and you think, oh shoot, I wish I had asked, I am sure we can get an answer to you. So in just a second, we're going to put our contact information up again. So please feel free to reach out to any of us. If you send me the question and I know it's for one of these guys, I'll get with them. I know them. I even know where one of them lives, I think. So we can hunt them down. Do you provide any tips on how to increase adoption or usage of SharePoint sites? Oh, that's a whole webinar right there. Being able to see how your people are using SharePoint can definitely help you once it's there, because you can say, okay, I just set up this site for the legal team. Wow, they've only uploaded 5 documents. What's the disconnect? So it can help you address pain points. It can help you see what's working well.
Yeah, my number one on that, Joy, is always try and tie it to a business process. Because the minute you tie your SharePoint deployment to something that people need to do, I don't want to use the word expense reports because that's probably not a good place to start. But I tell you, if they had to get paid because they're using SharePoint, they're going to use SharePoint very quickly.
True. But one way to increase adoption, and this, for any IT folks on the phone, this can be a difficult thing, but the number one piece of advice is have the conversation. Let them see how it's going to benefit them. Ask them how they work. What they need, what that business process is, and help them feel involved. And you'll see an increased, willingness to help you solve the adoption issues. Why aren't you using it, right? Well, you just gave me a library and I don't have any columns that work with me, right? I don't know how to put stuff in here. It's clunky. Name, title, modified by, that's all the columns I have. It makes no sense for me, right? Just having that conversation can help a lot. Us IT folks don't like to have those conversations, though. It can be hard for us sometimes to walk down into somebody's office.
It's working. Figure it out. Come on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so very much, everybody, for joining. Guys, I appreciate you all taking, the time to put the slides together and come online and share with us what you provide. That's absolutely fantastic. You guys have a gorgeous product.
Well, thank you for inviting us. That was great.
Yeah,
thanks, everybody, for attending.
Yeah, thank you for spending the time with us. Very much appreciate it.
Okay. Oh, we've gotten some thank yous from them. Oh, you guys are great. Yeah. We appreciate you all being here. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead, go on mute. I'm going to pause the recording. I will stay online for just a few minutes for questions, but we will go ahead and end the broadcast. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.